Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and a tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to my D&D 2024 player class series, the final one of this series. In this video, we're going to take a look at the Wizard class from the D&D 2024 Player's Handbook, including class breakdown, differences between the 2014 version, my top 5 species and backgrounds, and my personal subclass rankings. And if you stick around to the very end, we will indeed build our final character using the 2024 rules via the Roll20 character monster. If you enjoy these D&D videos and want to support my channel, please check out patreon.com/RogueWatson. Let's talk about the wizard. And the wizard is average complexity for some reason. Is a pure spellcaster. That doesn't sit right with me. Are there other... See, bard is high. Cleric is average also. Yeah, so I guess cleric... Weirdly, cleric and wizard are considered maybe the easiest of the spellcasters, but still a very pure spellcaster. And I mean, the subclasses add a little bit more complexity on there, but not as much as maybe other classes. But you have a ton of spells as a wizard, and we'll get into how the whole knowing spells and preparing spells things work. Primary stat is intelligence. Notice how no other class actually uses intelligence. That makes wizard pretty unique, at least because we don't have artificer now. If we had artificer, they would also probably use intelligence because they did whenever they added them later on in 5e's life cycle. Sadly, do not have Artificer here in the 2024 book, so Wizard is the sole possessor of the intelligence stat, which means they'll generally be better at certain skills versus other classes, because intelligence is a very popular dump stat for a lot of classes, because it's not, Dex is used for initiative, and armor class, constitution obviously for concentration saving throws, as well as just your hit points, like a lot of other stats. And wisdom tends to be one that's triggered a lot on saving throws. Intelligence is usually not used very much across the board for classes that don't use it, which may make Wizard a little trickier to build for, because you do still want to have those other good stats, but intelligence you do have to worry about for the Wizard. Also makes our background rankings probably a lot more different than a lot of the other classes, because we care about intelligence. Wizard loves spell books. They sure do. So unlike the sorcerer, where all their spell casting comes from just their innate talent and power, like their raw ability, or a cleric, which has it from a god or a divine presence. Druid gains their power from nature. Wizard is just studying. It's just, you got to study and learn and figure out how to do the magic, and that all comes from a spell book that you're casting from. So the wizard is on the low end of the totem pole with only a d6 of hit points, which puts them down with sorcerers. Definitely don't want to be anywhere near the front if you can help it. In fact, there are no subclasses, unlike a lot of other classes which have their subclasses be like kind of a hybridization of other classes. The wizard doesn't really have that. The wizard subclasses are purely just doubling down on certain spell schools, and there's really no wizard build without a heavy multi-class that has them being able to be anywhere near the front line. And you have no armor proficiency whatsoever. One of the few classes that has no armor training and no unarmored bonus at all. So you're relying on basically either mage armor and or the shield spell whenever you get targeted. You do have simple weapons. They cleared that up in the 2024 edition. Instead of listing like, oh, you can use daggers and darts and staffs, it's just, look, everything is either simple weapon or martial weapon. So technically wizards can use more weapons, but you don't care. You're going to be using your cantrips anyway. Saving throw proficiencies, intelligence, and wisdom. Intelligence, I think, is rarely used unless you're fighting like mind flayers or something. Maybe that'll change the new monster manual. Wisdom is a very good one to have, but we're definitely going to miss having constitution as a saving throw, especially for casting spells that involve concentration, which a lot of wizard spells are. So that makes I think it's the resilient feat be very handy, because you can gain proficiency in constitution saving throws. Skill proficiencies are pretty good. Arcana is an obvious choice. These are all basically intelligence ones: history, investigation, nature. Most of those all of those I just listed are intelligence based. Not very much money though. You really don't need much money as a wizard, because you don't have much equipment you can use. You already start with your spell book, or I guess you could buy a spell book if you need to. However, there is a bit of a money sink when it comes to scribing spells into your spellbook, because the wizard has a unique feature where they can add additional spells into their spellbook. So, Dearest Wizard, we gain our spellcasting feature at right at level 1, as well as arcane recovery at level 1, which I believe was the same as the 2014 edition, where we got to recover some of our spell slots after a short rest. I feel like a lot of other classes have now have the equivalent of an arcane recovery The sorcerer can get their sorcery points back. A warlock can get their spell slots back even quicker by using their new feature. So a lot of them kind of borrowed from the arcane recovery, and the wizard just didn't get anything like buffed or anything. So basically, once per adventuring day, once per long rest, you can spend during your short rest to regain half your spell slots up to your wizard level. So, for example, if you're a level 2 wizard, you can regain 1 level 1 spell slot. If you're a level 4 wizard, you can regain either 2 level 2 spell slots, or sorry, 1 level 2 spell slot or 2 level 1 spell slots. You can do that only during 1 short rest per day, but that does help effectively extend their spell slot lifespan. And they do get a lot of spell slots, but they don't get any more than any other class than a sorcerer or cleric does. Your pure or a bard, frankly. All your pure spellcasters. What makes a wizard different, though, is I think, and I'm sure some folks will correct me if I'm wrong about this. I don't think I'm wrong. I think the wizard at this point is the only class that actually has to prepare their spells from a limited knowledge of having spells. I'm describing this very poorly, but so like a cleric has access to all of the spells on their spell list. Like if you go to the table for cleric which is very handily now put in the class section, you can pick amongst any of those spells to prepare for, I believe, each adventuring day. In fact, I think I had this. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, so when they finish a long rest, they can actually change the number of spells they have. Same with a druid. Any of their spells can be changed on a long rest, and they can do it from the entire table. Technically, a wizard can also do that, but you don't have access to the entire wizard table, which is different than how I believe every other class works. Instead, the wizard has more spells available than anybody, but they can only learn a certain amount of spells, and that comes down to this section under the spell book. So you have a spell book, contains 100 pages, can only be read by you. It contains the spells that you have. You start off with the spells you know. It starts with 6 level 1 spells of your choice. And then whenever you gain a new wizard level, you add 2 more wizard spells to your spell book. So when you go to prepare your spells, you can only choose from the spells that you know, not just from the laundry list of spells available to the wizard, which granted is a lot more than most. I mean, you can see the level 1 alone is a shit ton of spells, way more than most classes have access to. So I always thought that was very weird for the wizard, because you think the wizard should know more spells than anybody else, because that's their whole thing. But actually, they don't. And maybe the problem is I'm comparing it to divine spellcasters, which technically a druid is, I guess, classified as a divine spellcaster versus an arcane spellcaster. So that's the discrepancy there, is you only, in fact, I did the math. You did the math. So if I'm calculating this correctly, so a wizard has 6 spell slots, 6 spells they know at level 1, and they gain 2 every level after that. However, the subclasses give them additional spells. You get 2 more spells of that subclass school whenever you get to level 3, and then you get an additional 1 spell every time you gain access to a new spell level. So I probably screwed up the math somewhere, but I believe that means that you have 14 spells that you know at level 3. I think that's correct. And that means by level 10, you would know approximately 31 spells, which sounds like a ton, right? Like having access to 31 spells. Now, you can still only prepare the number of spells that it says under this table. So I just said by level 10, you know 31 spells. You can prepare 15 of them, which prepare means those are the only spells you can actually cast for that adventuring day. So you don't get to just pick and choose from all the spells you know. You don't get to pick and choose like from all the spells in existence. You first have to pick. I confused myself trying to realize this, because I don't know why, and I realize this is a holdover from older editions, but like no other class has to worry about this. Instead, other classes, they are technically more limited because they can only prepare the spells, and then those are the spells they have to cast. That's it. There's no other system there. Whereas the wizard, you're also preparing, but you can technically know more spells. I guess it gives them a little more flexibility, but I keep comparing it to the cleric and druid, where I'm like, well, they don't have to fucking worry about that. They can just take whatever spells they want at any time. They have access to all of their spells, I think, if I'm getting this correctly. So, for example, a wizard knows 31 spells, which sounds like a lot, but a 10th level cleric effectively knows 70 plus spells because they have access to all of their spells to choose from because you're at 5th level at that point. So I always thought that was weird. I don't know if that's a criticism of the wizard or not. A wizard does have the most spells that they know compared to other arcane spellcasters, which are mainly the bard and the sorcerer. So you do know more spells than that, but it feels a little goofy to me, I guess, that you're still having to do that intermediary process of like, okay, I only know this many spells from my first laundry list of all the spells I can ever choose from. So then I have to copy those in my spell book, and then I have to prepare from those spells. And you're telling me the wizard is average complexity? Like, I'm trying to describe it, and I don't think it's average complexity. So interesting little bit there, I guess. Now, that's not including the scribing spells feature, right? So the wizard uniquely can add new spells. In addition to all those base level ups, you can spend 50 gold in 2 hours to copy a spell from a spell scroll into your spell book at a rate of that cost and time per spell level, which means that starts going up real quick, right? If you want a level 3 spell, that's 150 gold. That's I mean, we joke about how much money that players make, but like no other player class, I believe, has that kind of cost requirements. I mean, a one-time big purchase of like plate mail or something for your fighter, I guess, could be pretty big. But Wizard also has to worry about those spell components, right? Like any of those giant spell components, a lot of the summon spells have like things that require like 300 gold or something. You don't have to buy that every time you cast it, but you have to buy it the first time, is kind of like your equipment stuff. And the Wizard doesn't have that much money to start with. So I don't know how much folks engage with the system of copying a spell into their book versus just using the spell, from the spell book whenever they have it. It's an interesting system, and also interestingly enough, the subclass actually lost the feature that gives it a discount. They got rid of that, so I don't know why in particular, but that's how the wizard works with their spell casting. They technically know more spells than a sorcerer or bard does, but they still prepare the same amount of spells per day, which means I think that flexibility is an asterisk. It's like, yes, they have the flexibility, but you also have to have the foresight and knowledge to be able to pick the right spells for the adventuring day. And that just adds another level of like stress and analysis that frankly I don't need, which is probably why I don't play Wizards very often. Maybe folks really like that kind of a thing, but I don't know. And by adventuring day, I guess I just mean long rest. So the other thing is, if your party's long resting a lot, then, I mean, you're having a great time as a wizard, and it doesn't really matter because you can constantly change your spells around. But as a DM, I tend to not let my players long rest as often, but do let them short rest quite a bit in order to stretch out that adventuring day and give it a proper balance for whatever we're doing, whether it's a dungeon crawl or just even overland travel. I don't let them automatically long rest, for example. So that could be the other factor, is maybe you're long resting more often doesn't matter too much. All right, level 2, we get a brand new feature. So the wizard subclass initially, I believe, came online at level 2. So now it comes online at level 3, which is the same as every other class. They did that uniformly. So now the new feature is you just get expertise in one of your wizard skills. Everything except insight, weirdly enough. I don't know why. But you can just gain expertise. Probably going to take Arcana, but allows you to be an even more pro at one of these skills, which is fine. It's not a big thing, I guess, but whatever, more expertise. I mean, it doesn't make sense. You're like the studious one. You should probably have expertise in one of the skills that you've studied. Wizard subclass, level 3. We'll go into that later. We get our ASI and feat at 4. Wizard, does not get a whole lot of features because they rely on just having a lot of spells, and they're pure spells. We do get 2 new features. No, 1 new feature. Sorry, the 18 and the capstone and all that's the same. I guess the epic boon is technically new. I don't really go over epic boons too much because every single class has those. The level 5 feature, memorize spell, is brand new. So this says when you finish a short rest, you can replace one of your spells you prepared for your spellcasting feature with another spell from the book. So I just mentioned how the wizard, I think it's a pain in the ass that you have to prepare spells every adventuring day. And this, starting at level 5, you can replace one spell with a short rest, which again is that kind of tedious system of like, oh man, out of all these spells that I know, which of these do I want to have ready to cast for this adventuring day? So you can short rest and be like, oh man, we're really fighting like fire guys, and I need to prepare like protection from energy or something, and then I can swap that out with something else. You can do that as a short rest. So that's nice, at least, and helps like I mean, I just complained for several minutes about the tediousness of the wizard having to worry about this, so that gives you a little bit of pushback against that, and you can do that on a short rest to be able to replace one of those spells. Then we just have nothing but like ASIs, feats, subclass features, and new spells available as we level up, all the way up until we get to 18, which the 18 is basically a weaker version of the 20 capstone. So I'll go with the 20 capstone first, which is actually really cool. One of the, I think, more interesting capstone abilities, which is you can take 2 level 3 spell books and you can cast them without expending a spell slot once per short rest. You always have them prepared. And you can just cast them for free. And level 3 spells are great. I mean, that's Fireball, that's Hypnotic Pattern, that's Fear. These are some monster spells. Level 3 is like when things really open up. You get them at 5th level for pure spellcasters. So that's a really cool feature. And it's basically cast them once per short rest without expending a spell slot. You can obviously still cast them with spell slots as well. Amazingly cool feature that I think is very appropriate for a level 20 wizard. And then level 18 is just kind of a weaker version of that, which is you can choose a level 1 and a level 2 spell. You always have them prepared, and you can cast them with their spell slots. You can do that once per long rest, whereas level 20 feature is actually once per short rest. It just gives you basically a free level 1 and level 2 spell book, but you do have to select certain spells to be able to cast them with. I also think that's really great. I would have gone further with that and why not break that up and let the wizard get this? I mean, those are really cool features, some of my favorites for high level features. But I mean, yeah, level 18 and 20, like how often are we going to actually make it to these levels? Like, why not make it like level 15 or something? We get the level 1, and then later at level 18, we get the level 2 free spell. I really liked how Pillars of Eternity did it, by the way, which they actually had to nerf there. So for Pillars, whenever you made it to a higher level, like level 10 or something, you started being able to cast all your low-level spells for free, essentially. Or maybe it was probably like per short rest instead of long rest or something, how they did it. And to where like at level 10, you could do all your level 1s per short rest, then at like level 13, you could do all your level 2s or something. They did nerf that and select it where, okay, now you choose one spell that you can cast basically per short rest. And then at another level, you can choose a level 2 spell you can cast per short rest. So that's kind of what it's doing here a little bit, but I would have liked to do that a lot. Or like I said, with Pillars, you start at like level 10 or 11, you can start doing that. And then here it's not till 18. So you do have to wait a long time before you get that feature. In terms of spells, I don't know if I need to go over all the spells because we've gone over them a lot. This is the very last player class video. Chill Touch, they changed to make it actual touch attack. I don't know what else has really changed very much here. We've added some spells from like Tasha's and Xanathar's in here. Obviously, True Strike and Blade Ward have both changed a lot. I still don't think Blade Ward is very effective. True Strike is very fun, but not for somebody who's not going to be actually using a weapon attack. And then you basically just have access to every single spell that's not every single arcane spell the wizard does have access to in their spell list. And it is a bunch. Like by the time you're 3rd level, we get let's go over the subclasses, then I'll tell you exactly because we did the math on that. So we do have 4 subclasses, which is reduced from like the 8 we had in the original Player's Handbook, right? Because we had 1 for every single spell school, which I believe is 8. So instead, we have only 4 from those spell schools: the Abjuration, Divination, Evocation, and Illusion. So unfortunately, we really lose Conjuration, which is a bummer because that's one of my favorite spell schools, and Necromancy, which I thought was actually a pretty fun subclass in the 2014 book. So weirdly, the Wizard, similar to the Cleric, honestly, Cleric and Wizard both had a ton of subclass in the original 2014 book, and now Cleric only has the 4, and Wizard only has the 4. So they both got reduced quite a bit, and none of them from Xanathar's or Tasha's. These are all from the Player's Handbook. So the first one we're going to go over is Abjurer. I was going to say Abjuration, but it's the Abjurer. I don't like saying that word. So something they changed with all of the subclasses, by the way, was that instead of doing the discount of the scribing scrolls from that school for the class, instead they said, you know what, fuck it. You get just free spells from that school every time. Every other level, you get 1 additional spell that you know in your spell book from that school. And then when you first take this subclass, you gain 2 spells from that spell school. So that does up how many spells that we have. And then I did the math because I thought it'd be fun to kind of compare, like, well, what does that mean? Like, how many spells are actually of that school for the wizard. So between the Abjurer, Diviner, Evoker, and Illusionist, those 4 schools, who do you think has the most spells? Which of those spell schools appears the most in from level 1 to 9, not including cantrips, because cantrips don't really matter. I guess it technically says you can choose magic spells from the cantrip list, but we already get a lot of cantrips, so I'm not too concerned about those. So not including cantrips, level 1 plus spells. Who has the most? The most, I will go ahead and tell you, you might have already guessed it, out of those 4, is Evocation. Evocation has over 30 spells, 34 I counted, from level 1 to 9. The fewest amount of spells, I should say, you've probably already guessed that one as well. The fewest is the Diviner with only 19 divination spells. And then Abjurer and Illusionist are actually tied at 26 spells each. So you do have a lot of options there still. Even the divination one has a lot of options. A lot of divination spells are ones that, frankly, a lot of people pass over. Abjuration includes, all your protective spells, all your buffs, basically, are Abjuration. Your mage armors, your protection from evil and good. Shield is obviously a good low-level spell a lot of people take. The level 2 ones are not very good. Arcane Lock and Arcane Vigor. Arcane Vigor, by the way, is like, I don't know if it's a new spell they added in Tosh or something, but it's like, hey, you get to roll it's like the equivalent of a short rest. But for a level 2 spell slot, it just doesn't seem very effective to me. So that's part of what you get when you take these subclasses. You just get extra spells. So a lot of the value I'm attributing to these subclasses is like how good are those spells and how many options you have and all of that. Abjuration is decent if you want to play a more defensive wizard, I suppose. And plus their ability, Arcane Ward, is a unique ability that is very defensive, which is whenever you cast an Abjuration spell, not a cantrip, you can create this ward that has its own hit points, basically an overshield or something. But it's not temporary hit points. It is its own shield that has its own hit points. And the hit points, when you first cast it, or first activate this effect, is equal to twice your wizard level plus your intelligence modifier, which is pretty solid. So at level 3, that's going to be 6 plus probably 4. You're looking at 10 hit points at level 3. That is not anything to sneeze at. I think that's actually pretty solid. And then obviously whenever somebody hits you with a damaging attack, whatever, you can subtract those hit points first before you take any damage. Interestingly enough, the ward stays up all the way until your next long rest. Even if it has 0 hit points, the ward actually remains. And the reason it clarifies that is because you can actually continue to add hit points to it. So whenever you cast an Abjuration spell, after it's already been up, the ward just regains a number of hit points equal to twice the level of the spell slot. One new feature they added in 2024 is that as a bonus action, you can simply expend a spell slot, and the ward regains a number of hit points equal to twice the level of the spell slot expended. So you don't have to even worry about casting an Abjuration spell. You can do that as a bonus action. I don't think that's very worth it, though. I mean, the level of the spell slot. So if you cast a level 1 spell, a level 1 Abjuration spell, like you Protection from Evil and Good on somebody, then the ward regains 2 hit points. Right? That's not really anything. And so if I wanted to use it as a bonus action, expend a spell slot, am I going to spend like a 3rd level spell slot to regain a number of hit points? I mean, I could gain 6 hit points that way. That's a 3rd level spell slot. So maybe if you get much higher level to where you're not really using those lower level spell slots, you can actually use a bunch up to just get this ward. But I don't think it scales very well. Though the initial ward is fine and pretty solid because it does scale to twice your wizard level, which is nice, and I think that works out pretty well. But it's the additional casting and getting the hit points that I don't think necessarily scales very well. And it's only for you, and it's once per long rest. Now at level 6, then you gain the ability to apply the shield to other people. They have to be within 30 feet, and you have to take your reaction, but you can cause that ward to absorb the damage. That's pretty awesome. 2 caveats. 1, I think this should have been in the level 3 ability. This should have been like automatically right there, being able to support your teammates. And 2, you're still probably the best target for the Arcane Ward. I imagine the one who wants the emergency shield is the super squishy fucking wizard who's like, oh shit, somebody just attacked me. I need to throw this up so I take 10 less damage versus another member of your party. I mean, obviously you could have other squishy members of your party, but you're probably still the best target for this, honestly. So I don't. If you've played an Abjuration Wizard and you've done this shield before, let me know how it plays. I've never seen or been anywhere around anybody who's played this style of wizard. But it doesn't sound terribly impressive to me. It sounded like it really needed a buff, and I don't think the one change they made of that bonus action, expending a spell slot to regain hit points, just doesn't seem like it scales very well with just twice the level of the spell slot expended. I don't think that's nearly enough hit points for the amount of like damage and the amount of hit points like players have. Like that just doesn't feel like much. If you've got 40 hit points and you're like, yeah, I expend a spell slot to get like another 2 hit points on my shield, like that, I don't think that's going to feel very good. Now level 10 means you always have the 2 best abjuration spells in the game, which are Counterspell and Dispel Magic prepared. So that means you can prepare other spells. In addition, you can cast Dispel Magic as a bonus action, and you can add your proficiency bonus to its ability checks. Whenever you cast Dispel Magic, you have to make an ability check to actually have that be dispelled. I think it may be that things that are lower level are automatically dispelled. Yeah, any ongoing spell of level 3 or lower on the target ends, and if it's a level 4 or higher ability, a 4 or higher spell going on, then you have to make an ability check in order to get rid of it. So you are better at doing that, and you can cast it as a bonus action. The reason Counterspell doesn't have that same terminology is because Counterspell has been changed in the 2024 edition, where instead of you having to make a similar ability check as if it was Dispel Magic, now you, by the way, Counterspell is still the reaction if somebody's casting a spell. Now that creature who is trying to cast the spell gets to make a Constitution saving throw, and then if they fail, the spell dissipates and has no effect. The other writer here on the level 10 features that when you cast either spell with a spell slot, that slot isn't expended if the spell fails to stop a spell, because that sucks, right? You're trying to counterspell it, or you're trying to dispel magic, you're having to make the check, or the target is trying to make the save. They do, or you fail, or whatever happens. You're like, well, that sucks. I tried, guys. But at least you're not out that spell slot if it does fail. So it's a good feature because this is probably the most useful your abjuration. Sorry to shit on abjurers, but counterspell and dispel magic are by far, I think, the best abjuration spells for Wizard. And it's nice that Wizards is like, yeah, that's true, but you have to wait till level 10 until you can really get all the benefit of using those particular spells. But it's a good feature. Level 14 is an amazing feature. It's a boring one, but it's very powerful, which is just advantage on saving throws against spells, and you have resistance to the damage of spells. Now, it doesn't say of magical effects, because remember, the magic action could involve spells. It could involve a number of things, really, right? Like Channel Divinity now is a magic action, even though it's not a spell. This specifically says spells, which I would be a stickler on as a DM. If a monster was using a magical effect, then I would not let my Abjurer get their spell resistance. But if they were casting a literal spell, then I would. And it gets into even bigger gray area because I know a lot of monsters now, they don't even cast spells. They have like even more abilities that are like spells, I think. So I imagine there is going to be some pushback on that, and I would have to find a nice middle ground. But the idea being that like this specifically says spells and not all magical effects, but still pretty useful, I think. And I would allow it if there were traps that were basically spells, like a Glyph of Warding, or if they step on a pressure plate and it activates like the Cloud Kill trap or something, then I would allow them to get advantage and resistance on all that kind of stuff. So very, very powerful effect, although albeit a, obviously boring one because it's just kind of an always on passive. So that is the Abjurer. Now let's go over the Diviner, which is still all about those portent die. If you haven't played a Diviner or seen one in action, it is a pain in the ass for DMs to deal with. So the divination spells I mentioned are the fewest amongst all the, or at least the fewest amongst those 4 spell schools. I didn't count all of them. They include, for level 1 and 2 spell purposes, Comprehend Languages, Detect Magic, Identify, Augury, Detect Thoughts, Locate Object, Mind Spike, and See Invisible. A lot of those are rituals, by the way, which a ritual spell means you cast it for 10 minutes longer and it doesn't take up a spell slot. So they're good spells to have because for utility purposes, because you don't feel like you're actually using up your precious spell slots to cast them, and they really help round out a wizard's utility in particular. But I don't know how useful it is to be able to take those as free spells necessarily for the divination. So I think it's probably might be one of the weaker classes just for the spell school. But then they kind of make up for it with Portent, which is crazy. So Portent is still the same, which is whenever you finish a long rest, you roll 2 d20s, and then you just have those d20s in your bank. And then whenever you see another creature make a roll or about to make any kind of, it's called a d20 test, anything, a saving throw, an ability check, an attack roll, you can say, wait a minute, I'm going to say that this is actually the result. And I believe it says the result and not the roll. It says you can replace any test made by your creature that you can see with one of these foretelling rolls. So to me, that says that it's not. Oh, that's actually interesting wording. I would love some clarification on this from some of you. You replace any D20 test. It doesn't say the roll that you can see with one of these foretelling rolls. So I think that is like the final. In other words, if a creature is about to roll their attack roll, right, and they've got like a +5 to hit, and they would roll and then apply the +5. I think it's the way it sounds is that you can say, no, don't roll. Instead, here is their result, not here is their roll, because that would be different, because then the DM would still be able to apply the modifier. And I don't think that's the case. I think this is like, hey, no, I foresaw this. This is the roll that they make, or this is the result that they make. Sorry. You can only use it once. For each one once, obviously, between a long rest. But man, talk about clutch. Like, a lot of it depends on what you roll. Obviously, if you roll like 2 10s, that's less useful. But if you roll like a 2 and a 18, well, now you know, like, oh, a 2 is going to be an instant miss or instant fail. If we want to, cast a paralyzation spell on the enemy, I can say, oh, you got a 2, so you are paralyzed. Like, what a pain in the ass that is for the DM, and there's not a lot of things you can do about that. And what annoys me is it doesn't even take a reaction or anything to do that, or bonus action. It's just like, you can just do this. There's no action economy involved in this. So it's a super, super powerful ability. I kind of feel like it should have been nerfed a little bit, frankly, as a DM who's had to deal with this wizard. And I know that these wizards were always some of the most popular because of the Sport and Die. But no, it's just the same. And they probably were afraid to mess with it because it's a very popular feature, and it is. And it's, as a DM, I think it's a pain in the butt. But every long rest, basically, you can replace 2 results with 2 different die, and it can be very, very clutch. The level 6 feature I have mixed feelings about it. Whenever you cast a divination spell using at least level 2 spell slot, you can regain a spell slot that's of a lower level. That sounds amazing, right? Like, oh my shit, I can cast spells and regain spell slots. That sounds great. But it's specifically a divination spell, and I just mentioned divination spells are not the best. And a lot of divination spells are rituals. I haven't looked at the exact percentage of them, but in ritual spells, again, don't take up spell slots. So this would only be the divination spells that aren't rituals, and that would be a pretty limiting. But there are some. In fact, I believe Mind Spike. Yeah, I did list that one. Mind Spike is probably going to be your go-to damage. I believe it's a level 2 wizard spell. Yeah, it does like 3d8 damage, and the reason it's concentration is because you can technically, like, where the creature is after you cast it as kind of like a homing beacon on them. But mainly it's kind of a weak direct damage spell compared to other spells, but it does count as divination, so you could technically cast Mind Spike as an attack spell and then regain, one of your random level 1 spell slots that you could use for, I don't know, shield purposes or something. The crazy thing is there's no limit on this, but the limit is you only have obviously so many level 2 plus spell slots. Starting at levels, in fact, how many do you have at level 6? At level 6, we probably have 3. Yep. We have 3 level 2 spell slots, but we also have 3 level 3 spell slots. So actually, we have 6 technically slots that we could use to replace 4, but that's only on divination spells. So if you are really married to the concept of using divination spells, and maybe I've just sold you on using Mind Spike as your main damage attack, then you can regain those earlier spells and use those for, whatever you're using it on, shield, or I don't know what the fuck you want to use your level 1 spells for. I'm not your boss, but there are some interesting combos that you can do to get away with that. But I think it does. The temper is that a lot of them are ritual spells that you wouldn't use a spell slot for anyway. The level 10 feature is pretty cool, and it's the same as 2014. Actually, it's slightly different because it's a bonus action now, and they got rid of the Sea Ethereal one. So as a bonus action, once per short rest, you can activate essentially what is the equivalent of like a level 1 or even 2 spell, I think, for See Invisibility is a level 2 spell. So you can cast See Invisibility, you can read any language, which is comprehend languages, or you gain Dark Vision out to a range of 120 feet, which is the Dark Vision spell, I believe. One of those is level 1 and one of those is level 2 spells. So you can basically cast one of those for free every short rest, which adds to the fact that you're just pretty decent at utility and gives you some more powers, though. Those are fairly limiting and niche. They're not like the equivalent of, some of the other abilities, which are like, hey, you can grow wings or squeeze into stuff or have some kind of cool mobility feature. Dark Vision is great if you don't have that, trait, and even 120 feet is still better than what a lot of species can do. Reading any language, comprehend language is already like a level 1 ritual spell. I don't think that's terribly super useful. See Invisibility is really good to have, but you could go a whole campaign and not worry about invisible creatures. So It does have its niche uses. Level 14 just gives you a third use of your portent, which is amazing. Because that portent die is such a pain in the ass and so powerful. And now you can do it 3 times per long rest instead of 2 times. So Diviner is still uh, really fantastic because of just this one freaking feature of the portent. Evoker got a little bit of a rework. So I mentioned Evocation has 34 total spells. These are all your classic damage spells, basically. Level 1 and 2 examples. And the reason I'm giving those examples is because the ones that you get to take for free right off the bat when you take level 3, you get 2 of those. Burning Hands, Chromatic Orb, Magic Missile, Thunder Wave, Witch Bolt, Continual Flame, Darkness, Flaming Sphere, Gust of Wind, Melf's Acid Arrow, Scorching Ray, and Shatter. A lot of fun, popular spells that spellcasters are going to want to take. You don't really need to, and I've seen a lot of spellcasters make this mistake. You don't really need to take all damage spells, because I think you need to, like, you just don't need too many of any one kind of spell to me. But having the run of the mix of being able to take all of, whatever damage spells you need to can be very helpful, and you do have the most amount of those out of anything. This is where it got slightly changed. So Sculpt Spells is now at level 6 instead of at level, it was level 2, because we got our subclass level 2 in 2014, it would be level 3, and Potent Cantrip is now at level 3 instead of 6. They basically just swapped those features, because Sculpt Spells is really freaking powerful. So I'll get to that in a second. So Potent Cantrip you get earlier now, which means if you miss with an attack roll, or a target saves on a saving throw against a cantrip, they take half damage. So before, cantrips are all either, they miss, they hit or they don't, or they save or they don't. And that all depends on whether they hit or not, which is, fighters are like, yeah, if I don't hit, I don't get to do damage. Well, the wizard is like, nah, see, I'm still going to do some damage because I'm used to doing my half saves, whatever bullshit. So now the wizard will consistently do pretty constant damage, and the evoker should be attacking more often than most other wizard subclasses as well, because that's their whole deal. So that goes very, very well with how that wizard should be played, and you're going to be doing more consistent damage over time. That's only for cantrips, however, is that you get the half damage on the cantrips. But that's because a lot of other spells, they would have you do half damage anyway. Now the Sculpt Spells at level 6. Sculpt Spells are the one that makes the Evoker really amazing, which is, a problem with a lot of wizard damage spells. They're AoEs, and how do you protect your teammates? Well, the Sorcerer has, was a Careful Spell, I think, where they can technically shape it around those as a sorcery, using sorcery points, and kind of protect their allies that way. The Wizard, you have to take the Evoker, and it's only until level 6 where you get the Sculpt Spells feature. Whenever you cast an evocation spell, you can choose a number of them equal to 1 plus the spell's level. So for a level Shatter, that'd be 2 plus 1 is 3 characters, or for a Fireball, it'd be for 4 characters. Those creatures automatically succeed on the save, and if they would take half damage on a success, then they take no damage, which is like the evasion effect, basically. So that is amazing. Hopefully you don't ever need to do it that many creatures, because a big problem the wizard has, and I've literally seen this in my ongoing game right now with Call from the Deep, is the wizard goes maybe middle of the pack on initiative order, the fighter runs up there, the ranger runs up there, and then she wants to cast some big AoE fucking gravity sinkhole or some crazy thing, and she's like, oh, well, sorry, this is still worth it because there's like 8 enemies around you guys, but I'm also going to hit you guys, unfortunately. Well, Sculpt Spells is the answer to that. You can literally protect them. And there's no limitation on this, which is kind of crazy. It's not like you can only use this once per, short rest or anything like that. It's just, no, it's only for evocation spells, but I think evocation spells for the most part are the ones you would be doing this. The problem is if you wanted to cast crowd control spells, right? Hypnotic Pattern or Fear or some of those spells, then you can't sculpt the spells for that purpose. But for your fireballs, for your shatters, for your thunder waves, like all of that, you can protect your teammates with basically every time you cast the spell. So that is humongo. Level 10, you can add your intelligence modifier to 1 damage roll of an evocation spell. I think the reason it says 1 damage roll is to make sure you're only applying this once to the casting of the spell, and not for each instance that spell targets a creature, is how I interpret that. For example, Magic Missile, you can technically shoot, 3 or 4 missiles, and you can direct those different things. Same with Scorching Ray. But I think this effect, level 10 Empowered Evocation, would only allow you to add the intelligence modifier to 1 of those hits, versus if you just cast a Fireball, that's obviously only hitting 1 area technically, and then doing the damage, and then you add your intelligence modifier on top of that damage. It's good. I don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't even know if the damage is as good as potent cantrip over the course of the game, because if you're doing a lot of cantrips, being able to do that half damage is really nice. You're probably at level 10, you're adding 5 damage to basically all of your evocation spells, which, yeah, that probably does come out pretty good. But as I mentioned, it probably doesn't necessarily scale as well with like a magic missile or a scorching ray. But yeah, an extra 5 damage to your 30 damage fireball, whatever. It is good. Like it's a good effect. Yeah, that's all I gotta say. Level 14 is a cool like Super Saiyan mode, which I think is fantastic, and I wish more classes had this kind of risk reward ability, frankly. Which is you can maximize the damage of a wizard spell once per long rest, as long as it's not higher than 5th level spell slot. You can say, you know what? Instead of rolling for damage, I'm gonna deal all 8d6, so 48 damage. I think is it 8d6 for fireball? 48 damage on that fireball. Boom. Once per long rest, you can do that. You can also do that more than once per long rest, but if you want to do that, then you take 2d12 necrotic damage for each level of the spell slot immediately after you cast it. So a 3rd level spell slot is 6d12 necrotic damage. That's pretty nasty. So more than likely this is your one-time Super Saiyan boss fight, like once per long rest thing. But I think it's hilariously awesome that it does give players the cool risk reward option of doing it multiple times and take it. And if you're that player type personality, you're like, oh hell yeah, I'm doing this every dang time. I don't care about the damage, which I think is amazing. And it's actually a cool. It feels more like a sorcerer ability than a wizard ability, though. The fact that you can I gotta just dig deep and super power it or something like. But I still like seeing it. It's really nice, and I wish there were more kind of interesting risk reward features built in for different characters. So that is the Evoker. Still, even though they I would say balanced it a little better by putting sculpt spells later, it's still a very, very powerful, good class because evocation magic in D&D is also just very, very good. The Illusionist got a nice little buff in the 2024 edition. So illusion spells, there's 26 total illusion spells. Level 1 and 2 spells are Color Spray, Disguise Self, Illusory Script, Silent Image, Blur, Invisibility, Magic Mouth, Mirror Image, Nystul's Magic Aura, and Phantasmal Force. I think illusion spells are actually really fun and have a lot of cool uses, both in and out of combat, frankly. The level 3 feature, in addition to having those spells, of course, is Improved Illusion. So this gives you kind of a limited version of Subtle Spell from the Sorcerer, where it's only for illusion spells, and you can cast them without providing verbal components, but you still probably have to use the material, which is basically your spell book, or the somatic components, which is waving your hands. I guess Illusionist could be really fun about, making it so they're not cast. I don't know. That's kind of like RP, I think, when it comes down to it, or like, you're trying to do something, the DM's like, I don't know if they're going to tell you're doing a spell or not, so you can maybe say like, well, I've got this ability, and then I'd sit there and listen and be like, yeah, okay, if you're doing it well enough. Also, each illusion spell you cast that has a range, it increases by 60 feet, which means if it's a fear spell, which is illusion, that has a range of self because it emanates from you, that does not get an increased range. But something like Hypnotic Pattern or I don't know, whatever is a good example of that. I guess maybe invisibility or something would technically have a bigger, or like Phantasmal Force, those kind of things would have a bigger range. I don't know how big of a deal that really matters in the grand scheme of things. I think a lot of us are doing dungeon crawls where, 60 feet is probably fine. And if that's not fine, 120 feet is almost always fine. So maybe if you're having something at 60 feet, having that doubled is useful. But if it's already something that's 120 feet, I can imagine 180 is going to be super much better. But if you're going to want to have a big range on something, probably some sneaky illusion spell is going to be the most useful for that. Also, you get the minor illusion cantrip for free, and the cantrip, it doesn't count the number of cantrips, you already know that. It's better, basically. You can cast as a bonus action and do both sound and image, whereas minor illusion, the cantrip originally, which is something a lot of people fuck up because they think it's more powerful than it is, because we already have silent image as a level 1 spell. You can do both the image and sound. Normally you have to pick one of those two, so you get a more powered minor illusion. And frankly, not the sexiest level 3 ability. That's it. You just get a slightly more powerful minor illusion cantrip. Your illusion spells can be cast without verbal components, and they have a slightly higher range. That really feels pretty weak sauce to me for level 3. However, the level 6 ability is really cool. The original was some kind of lame, like, you can change your illusions to look like something else. I don't really understand the benefits of that, because I would argue like your illusion can already be something. I guess if you needed to be like, oh, it's shape-shifting into something and tricking somebody, but like I can already craft my illusions whatever the fuck I want. Now we have phantasmal creatures. We have the Summon Beast and Summon Fae spells already prepared. These are level 2 and level 3 spells. whenever we cast either spell, which are legit like, hey, we're summoning creatures with these spells, we can choose instead to cast them as illusion spells, and they can appear spectral. If we do that, they do not require a spell slot, but they have half the hit points. We can use that specific feature once per long rest. So we gain the spells anyway, right? That's nice. Those are free spells. And then if we choose to cast them using this feature, then it's an illusion spell. It doesn't cost a spell slot, and the creature has half the hit points. I think that's actually really cool. The beasts are not as strong or would be as useful to have as half hit points, because more than likely you want to summon this beast and have it like up there like tanking for you. I guess if you want to do the flying beast, which can do the flyby and be a pain in the ass in the air, that could be useful, because a lot of these don't have a lot of hit points anyway. So having the hit point, like they have like 30 hit points, having them to 15, depending on the level you are, I guess, could be the difference between whether they hang around or not. But the point I'm looking at is Summon Fae is actually a fantastic spell. With a pretty awesome stat block. Look at all these bonus actions this creature can do. Their main attack is pretty good, by the way. 2d6 plus 3, plus the spell's level in force damage as a multi-attack, although I believe they would only be able to make one. Yeah, if you're using that free third level spell slot, they're only making one attack. But the bonus action, they can either teleport, they have advantage on the next roll. Actually, part of that teleport, I believe. They can, as a wisdom save, target a creature, and if the creature fails the wisdom save, the target is charmed by you and the spirit for 1 minute or until the target takes any damage. So that's different from the what was it, the pixie or some fey creature that was in the familiar stat block, where it's like, oh, you can charm the target with their pixie bow or whatever, and the charmed condition just says that they're okay, well, they wouldn't attack my pixie, but that doesn't help me. But this one specifically does say the target is charmed by you and the spirit, so you could literally use your spirit's bonus action to target a creature who's about to attack you, and suddenly that creature regards you as a friend, or at least indifferent, which is pretty huge, and be like, all right, I'm just gonna walk away from them now, make sure not to target them. Like, that's pretty awesome. Or they can fill a little 10-foot cube with magical darkness. These are all very useful abilities that don't require the spirit to be up there tanking hit points necessarily. So that'd be a good use of this. And again, once per long rest, you can cast it for... frankly, Summon Fae is worth casting a third level spell slot for, I think. But you can also cast it once per long rest for free with half the hit points. That is really cool. So super thumbs up to that. I would probably use Summon Fae 90% of the time, and like Summon Beast just occasionally. But also just having those spells is nice. So... that's the entirely new feature. The level 10 feature is that still pretty good. You can use a reaction to create an illusion of yourself that you're duplicated from, and that causes an attack to automatically miss. Not disadvantage, not some kind of modifier, just the attack automatically misses you, which is really freaking awesome. And you can do it once per short rest, which is also nice, but you can restore it more often by expending a level 2 plus spell slot. Not sure how much that would be worth it, but just a once per reaction to be like, nope, you're not going to hit me with that giant attack. It'd be nice if there was like a teleportation involved in there, because I feel like the illusion duplicate would be kind of some of that. It kind of gives the effect of like a mirror image on all the time, but only like once per short rest, I guess. But it's still a good feature that I think would be used quite a bit. And then the level 14 ability is one of the few abilities in the entire D&D 2024 player handbook that is actually kind of an open-ended interpretation ability, which the 2014 book had more of those, and this one really doesn't. They kind of cleaned up a lot of the rules, but this one really is kind of open, which says when you cast an illusion spell with a spell slot, you can choose one inanimate non-magical object that is part of that illusion and make it real. The object remains for 1 minute, during which it cannot deal damage or give any conditions. You can do it as a bonus action to make the object real. And what's interesting, the example is something I wouldn't even thought of. For example, you can create an illusion of a bridge over a chasm and then make it real and cross it. That's clever as hell. I wouldn't even think of it as a bridge as an inanimate, non-magical object. I'm thinking, object like, oh, something you can hold or something. But yeah, you can make a bridge. So you're kind of like changing reality in a little bit of a ways. Only for a minute, though. And you can't make like a monster or, I mean, you can, but... Well, actually, no, you can't. It's inanimate, non-magical object. So it has to be a thing. It can't be a creature. And it can't deal damage or give any conditions. So you can't be like, I'm going to make a giant... iron ball over that creature's head as an illusion, and I make it real and it falls down and crushes them. Like, it can't deal damage. So, but for utility purposes, that actually is pretty fun and interesting, and really kind of transforms what you can do with silent image and major image and all these different kind of spells. Even minor illusion might be able to come in handy, and there's no limitation to it other than it is based on your illusion magic you're using to create it. It does say you have to create it with a spell slot, so you can't actually do it with minor illusion. I think I misspoke. You can't do it with a cantrip of minor illusion. You'd have to use silent image or major image or one of those kind of effects. But I think it's interesting, but it also is very dependent on the player for thinking of these things and working with the DM to make it work. So subclass rankings is pretty challenging here because I think the wizards are all pretty different from each other, and it's hard because you're having to value all of those spells of the school, because that is part of it, right? You get a lot of free spells from the school with the extra effects that you are getting from that subclass. I think number one, though, just has to be Evoker for me, because I mean, you're always damage. I think is always going to come in handy. That's what a lot of people have wizards and pure spellcasters for, is just to do that big raw burst damage, especially big AOE damage, which is what the Evoker specializes in. The wizard also have access to more evocation spells than any of those other four or those other three subclasses. And even though they change sculpt spells to where it's a little bit later, just still just very, very helpful. And you don't get Fireball till level 5 anyway, so it'd only be for like Shatter and Thunderwave and those purposes. And then you wait one more level. There's gonna be an awkward level where the Evoker's level 5. They want to use Fireball all the time, but you can't sculpt spells yet until level 6. So granted, that's going to be a little painful. But then level 6, you're like, okay, now you guys, the camera pans to the players who are all like singed and burned. And he's like, guess what, guys? Now I can protect you. And they're like, yay. But still very, very helpful. And all these abilities, really, they don't miss. Like, there's just a good ability in all of them. So Evoker number one. Then it gets really, really tough for me to rank them, because I think I have problems with all the other three subclasses when it comes to what they can do. I think I'm going to put Diviner at number 2, even though they have some of the weaker spells. And yes, I'm somebody who enjoys combat and the raw power of spellcasting, so maybe I'm undervaluing some of these utility spells. But I feel like a lot of these spells, like Locate Object and like Augury, and like those are things that like the campaigns are built around for, like going to see NPCs and professionals for. It feels weird to have that person in your party that just has the answers. So spell-wise, I think it's not very exciting. But that Portent Die is just too incredible and too useful. It is an amazing resource. The wizard can use it in all kinds of different ways. Doesn't even take a reaction or anything to do it. And you're going to be consistently using those for pretty much every single long rest that you have. So I think I still value the Diviner at number 2. Number 3, I'm going to go with the Illusionist, because I really like the new addition of having Summon Beast and Summon Fae involved. I think that really gave the class a good boost and a buff. I really like illusion magic in general, and I think all the spells do a good job of just making illusory magic more interesting and more powerful, and a cool reflection of that whole spell school. Abjurer then comes in last. I don't think Abjurer is necessarily bad, but I did think that the Arcane Ward, it just doesn't feel very sexy to me. The fact that you have to wait till level 6 to use on other people, and its initial burst heal is good, and it does combo with like temporary hit points or something, but then after that, like reinforcing it doesn't feel like it scales very well. Although the last two features, level 10 and level 14, are very strong features with Counterspell and Dispel Magic and all that. So I would rank them Evoker, Diviner, Illusionist, and Abjurer. All right, going into our backgrounds. I mentioned the backgrounds are probably going to be quite a bit different than all my other ones, because we care about intelligence, and nobody else really gives a shit about intelligence when it comes to wanting those as our main background. So we're going to be able to talk about some that we haven't really talked about too much before. So number 1, I think is pretty hard to argue against the one that's actually built for wizards, which is the Sage background. So the Sage background gives us intelligence, of course, which I'm basically requiring all these to have intelligence. Like, you just need to have that. Constitution, though, I would rank as number 2. Similar, again, to all the other pure spellcasters, where, like, hey, you want your main spellcasting stat, and then you also want Constitution for just shoring up hit points, but also concentration saving throws. And then you want Dexterity, because that's also just a good stat in D&D. It's your armor class, and it's your initiative and all that. So Sage gives us Magic Initiate Wizard as a feat, which means we get even more cantrips and a free level 1 spell slot. A free level 1 spell and a free casting of that level 1 spell, which is a lot of options we can do that. You wouldn't think a wizard needs more spells, but you know what? A lot of the feats, frankly, origin feats aren't the best for the wizard, and this one actually is pretty solid. So I'm going to say Sage as number 1 on my list. There is one that has my best lineup of skills, however, if that's what you're really wanting to shore up, and that's the Criminal. The Criminal has Dexterity, Constitution, and Intelligence, which to me are the top 3 stats for a wizard. God, maybe I should make Criminal number 1, because the alert feat's really good too. I think I don't know. How much value do I want to put on Magic Initiative Wizard? You know what? Yeah, I think I'm going to change it up. I'm going to change it up right here on the camera. I'm going to say Criminal is number 1 and Sage is number 2 because, yeah, Criminal does have all 3, which is funny as a wizard. I stole the spell book. That just has the best stat distribution and has a really good feat with Alert because being able to go, or wizards, a lot of times they're not going early, and being able to go early and get out that big AoE while the enemy hasn't closed into your party, or that big crowd control spell or something to shut the enemy down is very, very helpful, especially if one of your allies does not have the alert feat, because you can use it to swap initiative with them. Sleight of hand and stealth are skills we don't normally have access to, and just, having those ability scores. So I think Criminal actually might be number 1. Sage will put at number 2. I think that's going to leave us with Merchant. Yeah, we're going to say Merchant at number 3 because Merchant gives us Intelligence, Constitution, and the Lucky feat, which I do love Lucky for everybody. Maybe not as useful because I don't think the Wizard's going to be as targeted as much by others. But having that stat distribution with Lucky is pretty solid. So that's 3. 4, I think we're going to be looking at the Scribe, which is pretty much the other, wizard-themed one. Scribe has Intelligence and Dexterity. We don't have Combo, we do have Dex, which is nice to have. The Skilled feat, by the way, isn't too bad for the Wizard because Intelligence we're going to be good at. So we can pick up a lot of other skills that have to do with Intelligence. And I think we'll be not as good as a Bard when it comes to skills, or maybe even as a Ranger or Rogue, but hopefully up there with compared to a lot of other party members. And Skilled would certainly help that along. Perception, obviously, really good skill for anybody to have. Number 5, I think, kind of depends on your subclass. So if you are going specifically Abjurer, then I would value the Acolyte because Magic Initiative Cleric gives you a chance to take a Cleric spell, and you could take like a Cure Wounds or one of those which is Abjuration. Like a lot of the Cleric spells are Abjuration, so that would really help your Abjurer quite a bit. Also, it has Intelligence as an ability score. Wisdom and Charisma not as good, but shoring up mental saves with Wisdom is not a bad idea. But I think that could be a good choice for somebody who specifically wanted to play a more defensive Abjuration wizard is the Acolyte. If you don't, then I would probably put the Artisan as the 5th choice, which has Intelligence, Dexterity as our stats, and the Crafter feat, which is more thematic than useful for the wizard. You get to make like something depending on your tool proficiencies, a little object or something. But I could see the one character, class who's very studious and intelligent in that way could make use of that feat perhaps. But Dexterity and Intelligence, both really good. I don't really give a crap about strength as a wizard. So my top 5 are Criminal, Sage, Merchant, Scribe, and Artisan. Although for Abjurer specifically, I would slot in Acolyte in there for taking an extra Cleric spell. So those are my background choices. Then we get into the species, which kind of the same as, species don't have any of the stat choices like they used to. So it really is pretty similar to what the other main spellcasters were, which I always value. Elf and Tiefling, very high. I would probably put Elf at number 1 and Tiefling at number 2 because all of those give us spells, which we can choose to what our spellcasting ability is, which makes them really useful to all spellcasters. Obviously, we can apply our Elf spells and our Tiefling spells specifically to Intelligence and be able to use those a lot better. So these would give us more free spells that we can cast, which are all good spells for the most part. And then Elf gives us extra features like 120 Dark Vision for Drow or 35 feet for a Wood Elf, or a Tiefling would give us, and also for Elf we get the no long rest thing, the advantage on charm, the extra skill, which I do really like the extra skill option a little bit more than I do the Tiefling with having the extra resistance and the extra damage cantrips, because as a wizard we can take a lot of damage cantrips anyway. So those are my number 1 and 2. I would value Human, I think, at number 3. Having the free skill is nice. Having inspiration is really nice. The Origin feat, I would take either Tough to shore up our horrible hit points, or maybe take one of the Magic Initiates to, again, unlock that interesting combos of, whatever our subclass is that we can use to take an additional spell for, and just whatever, more spells is good. Number 4, I would put a Gnome for having a little bit more extra spells or cantrips and an advantage on all our mental saves. And then 5, I don't know about enough for 5. 5 is probably like Dwarf or Orc. Dwarf for extra hit points. Resistance is nice, I guess. Hopefully not getting hit too often. And Orc is probably the same. Basically, both are very defensive picks. So Dwarf for more hit points and resistance, or Orc just for relentless endurance. Essentially, I don't think Adrenaline Rush would be super useful for us. I guess we could just use it to gain temporary hit points, 1 per short rest. But I mean, I don't know. I would take one of the other ones, frankly. Elf, Tiefling, Human, or Gnome. And then if you really need to, number 4 or 5 would be Dwarf or Orc, I suppose. But those are the ones I would value for Wizard. All right, if you've hung around for this long, it's time for us to build our final character, which is going to be our Wizard character. As we build our custom Wizard, might need to refresh this page for a second. All right, don't fail me now, roll 20. Oh, we're jumping right into it. Okay, hopefully I didn't break anything. All right, so we want a 2024 Wizard. What subclass am I going to pick? Does anybody have a guess? Based on everything I just said, or maybe I have an idea for. My original idea was to make an Illusionist Wizard, but the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I'm basically just making an Arcane Trickster, and why wouldn't I just play Arcane Trickster? I was like, oh, I could do this, and I would subclass into Rogue, and in the Rogue subclass, I could take Arcane Trickster, and then why not just take Arcane Trickster? So I was like, this is me just not wanting to play pure spellcasters. But you know what? Here is an excuse to play one. Which is, let's see, what are they actually called? They're just whatever they are. Yeah, so Abjurer. I want to play not an Abjurer. I want to do a Diviner, actually. Diviner is what I'm going to choose for my 3rd level wizard that we're going to make. And species, I'm going to go with human. Just boring ass human. Don't have any strong feelings about. I feel like I made a lot of elves and tieflings. And a human needs some love. Having the inspiration could be quite useful for getting out of jams. Keep going. Where's human? There we are. All right, so we're taking human. We're going to be medium, I guess. I forgot that was a change. Is this my first time I've made a human? Man, it might be. I don't remember ever making it. A whole lot of humans. Background. I think we're going to go with a sage background, although I did rank criminal higher, which is funny. You know, I could go criminal. Because I have an inspiration for the character, and actually I think the character might have technically been a criminal. It's from a movie. But the idea for the character is they're like, the whole Diviner Portent thing is like they are either a time traveler or they're just fucking insane. And then I'd work with my DM to find out which one is true and what makes it more interesting. But like all their stuff is like, but they're like also, and this goes beyond the movie reference I was going to use. They're also like getting constant visions of like maybe the future, or maybe they've just studied a lot and that broke their brain. And that's how they're using like, the Portent die. Like, oh no, I think this is what happened. I remember I read about this. You know, so it's like somebody from the future who's like read a bunch of books about this kind of thing happening. So I think that'd be a funny idea for it. And their personality would just be kind of like a conspiracy theorist, like crazy person, but like, you know, hopefully fun, like, you know, party supportive, friendly way, not just a huge pain in the ass, but mainly as a way of like flavoring all of their various divination and ritual spells and important die and things. But what's funny is I could actually go criminal. You know, my initial idea was to go sage. I guess I'll stick with sage. But I could always switch that up, and I may, if I wanted to actually play this character, I could see myself going criminal as well. But I think I was going to make them maybe not as dark and hardcore as the which I've got. My one inspiration was well, I'll let you know when I do the name of the character, I guess, at the end. Where is Sage? My God, there's too many. S-A-G-E. There we go. So Sage background, which gives us intelligence, constitution, and wisdom. And it gives us the magic initiative feat. So we're going to choose even more spells. How fun is that? Human versatility gives us a free origin feat. Shit, which one was I going to choose for that? I don't actually know. For that reason, we could take alert. That probably makes the most sense, actually. This person would be like constantly, they'd be very jittery. So yeah, let's take the alert feat, which gives us proficiency, I believe, on our initiative rolls, and then we can swap them if we want to. Oh, and then a magic initiate. We're choosing that now. Okay, so intelligence, clearly And we want... Oh, it lets us... I don't think it's supposed to let us choose. I think we have to choose wizard when we choose the... whenever it shows that feat, right? All right, so magic, wizard, because that was part of the sage, is you only chose wizard. All right, so going next, let's roll for our stats. Obviously, we want great intelligence. Everything else can come later after that, but that'll help shore up the character. Okay, this looks above average. Nothing, well, I mean, a 16 is great. 12, 12, 16, 11, 14, 13. Honestly, that might be one of my better stat distributions. Nothing lower than 11 is pretty damn rare. So yeah, I think that's pretty good above average. Obviously, 16 intelligence, and we'll pop 2 of our scores into there, which means we can pop the second one into Constitution. So we should make Constitution a odd number. So let's make that the 13. That way we can bump it up to a 14, make our Dex a 14, and then we just have 11, 12, 12. Doesn't really matter too much from there. Actually, we'll make his Charisma the worst thing. He's probably pretty crazy. Yeah, so that's a pretty strong character. I mean, +2 con and +2 Dex is probably the best case scenario I was thinking, and +4 intelligence. So I have no complaints about this. This is fantastic stat distribution. Well done rolls, all told. But I'm glad I had intelligence, so we could start off with that 18 intelligence. It's gonna be very, very clutch. All right, wizard skills. Our sage proficiency already gives us Arcana and History. So we could take investigation, maybe. I don't know if he would know people very well. That might be a weakness of his, versus medicine, nature, or religion. Let's go with nature. We can then choose another skill as a human. We could choose anything. Maybe survival, weirdly enough. The picture he's had to survive. I mean, yeah, let's go survival. And then our level 2 feature allows us to get expertise and an ability. I think we want history. I think that's his whole thing, is maybe read too much history and just kind of went crazy. Our history is going to be an 8. I'll be like, man, DM, please give us a chance to roll the history check, even though it doesn't come up very often in most games. But please, we'll have a shot at it. But I'm liking these. I mean, +6 in Arcana is pretty solid. 6 in Investigation. Nature is very good. All right, Wizard. I did write down some ideas here because I knew this was going to be crazy to have to worry about all of these cantrips and things. Because Magic Initiate was also, Sage was also going to give us additional spells. All right, so for cantrips, I think we want a search bar, so I can just add these in there without having to scroll. This is what I really want. Light, because we are a human with bad eyes. Want to take light. We want to take Mind Sliver, because I think that's the equivalent. I would flavor this character as him just babbling and really being the crazy person, and that would be like him casting Mind Sliver is like other people like literally painfully hearing him talk about all of this stuff happening and how he's seen things, and message I think is very appropriate for another cantrip. Yeah, Eric, why are you taking Mage Hand? Well, we'll take that as part of Magic Initiative, I'm sure. All right, level 1 spells. We get 6 spells, and then we get more technically as we level up. This is a ton, but I did think I wrote them down. We also get our free divination spells later on. So I'm trying to keep these very flavorful to the character that I'm picturing, which is not honestly a lot of big, like, attacking spells. It's a lot of utility and maybe some mind type spells. So Charm Person, I think, is appropriate for that. We could take Color Spray, which I don't know how I'd flavor that one exactly, but just, I don't know. I like the spell, just a blinding feature. Featherfall, like, no, we didn't really fall here. That's a good reaction spell to take right there. I do want to take Find Familiar. I don't know exactly how I would flavor it, but Find Familiar is just too much fun for anybody who has access to not to take it and has a ton of utility and stuff. So I'm going to take it and figure out a way to flavor it later, what kind of animal companion they've got. And then I think you've got to take Magic Missile for at least one generic, like, solid attack spell. And let's see, where are you? Magic Missile. I don't know if I'll actually take Mage Armor with this character. Instead, we're going to take the other go-to spell that all wizards need to really take, which I can flavor that as like, no, he didn't really hit me, is the shield spell. Shield. That's 6 spells at level 1. And remember, those aren't all the spells we can prepare. Those are the ones we know. Then we can take 2 more level 1 spells. So I'm going to take Sleep, by the way, which got better. It's no longer has to do with hit points. It's just a big like AoE incapacitation, which I figure that is him like reciting everything so much that people are bored and pass out. And then I'm going to take Identify, because he would have read about that in a book somewhere. Probably not used too much. Again, this is going to be a very specific character that's maybe is the opposite of like an Evoker, basically. All right, now we can start taking level 2 spells. So we get 2 level 2 spells, and then we get 2 divination spells. So I would take, let's see, what did I write down? Hold Person and Crown of Madness is what I wrote down. They're both kind of the same thing, though, aren't they? Both could shut down like one person. Oh, wait, these are level 1 spells. Scroll down. I guess it's all down farther. God, I kind of hate this system that, okay. Nope, that's the end of the list. Roll 20, you're not letting me choose level 2 spells, boss. These are all level 1 spells. Why is that? Choose 2 spells you know at this level of 2nd level or lower. Click on it. Trying to select, yeah, wizards level 2 spells. Oh, sorry, they're just in here with the level 1 spells. I guess I missed that. Okay. Well, blindness, deafness could also be a good one. We'll go with my initial concept, which is Crown of Madness. CRO. Comprehend languages we'll take in a second. Crown of Madness. And then, which I realize those are kind of the same spell in terms of what we're trying to do to somebody. So I may change that later on. Now that I'm looking at it and thinking about it. So Hold Person. Again, all ways of like stunning people with his just insane conspiracy theories and constant babbling. Then we get to take 2 level 2. Or they don't have to be level 2, actually. Divination spells. In fact, I don't think they would be. I would just take spells that are good to have in general, which is Detect Magic, which you can pretty much have on all the time, which adds to the paranoia of this character. And what else? Probably, sorry, I'm using my notes, which I'm having to click off of it. Comprehend languages, I think, because he has read that stuff. Both level 1 spells, but still. And both rituals, so it doesn't really matter in terms of slots. All right, and then Sage gives us 2 more cantrips and another level 1 spell slot. So here is where I would probably take Mage Hand, because it's just damn good to take Mage Hand. I don't know how a wizard can be without it. And I don't have a lot of damaging spells, so I might take the new Chill Touch here. Hold the Dead would be good too. Chill Touch is now a melee, so maybe if I'm for some reason next to somebody, I can use that instead of... although I guess Mind Sliver I could use any distance, wouldn't really matter. And then my 1 free level 1 spell, I thought this was an interesting choice to take, because you can cast it once per long rest for free. So I thought a good use of that would be to take False Life. False Life gets us 2d4 plus 4 temporary hit points. So just being able to do that like once per day, because that's something like I know I'm always going to get value out of that every day. Every adventuring day, I could just cast that at the start of the day. It's instant. You just gain this many temporary hit points, just kind of having a little bit of a shield. It's like Foresight for him. So yeah, and if I wanted to, I could obviously spend additional spell slots to actually spend those slots to get more hit points. But I think just using that once per day could be pretty nice. Maybe I'll regret that choice as a higher level, but I think it's kind of a fun choice to take at level 1. Or our Magic Initiate feat. So that gives us a ton of spells, right? It feels like a lot, but again, like, you know, fucking Druid or Cleric, and they can just choose over spells they want in the end. A lot of cantrips, though, which is very nice to have from Magic Initiate. So I do like having those stack on there. And not too much concentration bumping against each other. I do regret taking both Crown and Hold Person. Those are kind of the similar concept where it's like, oh no, people are attacking. I need to cast this spell on somebody to shut them down. So I would probably replace one of those with something else, but otherwise, I like the spell list quite a bit. Wizard, we can actually take starting equipment. That's fine. I got no complaints about any of that stuff there. That's it. New character is Cole. If you know that movie, I'll give you a clue. It involves time travel. But really, really amazing movie. Which also another clue, they turned it into an actual pretty cool television show not too long ago either, which was nifty. But that would be my character would be a lot more fun, less probably like worryingly crazy, and probably less action hero-y, but still would be the same kind of concept where it's like, oh, I might be from the future, like I know all these things are happening, but I'm still confused about how they actually transpired. I'm trying to figure out these puzzles and stuff like that, and just be like a really kind of insane character. So that's my idea for a diviner wizard. Folks, we have made it to the end of my series of 2024 player class videos. I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss this. I'm going to miss us. I'm not going anywhere, but this was a really fun series of videos. It was a ton of work for me to produce. All of these videos are over an hour long. I've learned a lot about these classes that I probably have never learned nearly this much before. And frankly, all of you chiming in with all the comments and stuff are really quite helpful, and I appreciate everyone who's been respectful and been informative and everything, because certainly I'm always open to learning about this as well. Even with all my experience playing D&D, there's still a lot of classes and intricacies that I haven't seen before, and you know what, I've never played the 2024 edition, so all this stuff is brand new to me as well. So just want to give a special thank you to everyone who's been watching this long list of videos. If you haven't checked them out, then they're all up here on YouTube, where I've covered every single character class. Let me know like what other kind of content adjacent to this that you'd like for me to see or cover or talk about or anything like that. But for now, that is going to end this grand experiment in covering all of the classes from the player handbook. So thank you so much. You can look for more content on this channel, as well as the usual live stream and reviews. And you can support my work as always at patreon.com/Rogue Watson. Shouts to Platinum Patrons Joe, Will, Thomas, Brandon, Genocider, Eclectic, Roleplay Roll, Christopher, Corey, Big Nut, John F, John L, Nathan, Chris Link, Counselor, Andrew, The Reverend, Stephanie, Jason, Amat, Lumpy's Buds, Warden, Harold, Yuma, LLC, Tom, They're Eating the Dogs, Caleb, Marcus, Howard, and Snuggy, and Gold Patrons, RPG Papercraft, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, The Lizard Lounge, Jerome, Nathan, Passacator, Scott, Refus, Jerry, Glenn, and Mark. Thank you all very much for your support.